Welcome in to the DNVR Rockies podcast, brought to you by Strava Craft Coffee. Remember to use that promo code DNVR20 because you'll save 20% off your entire purchase of that CBD-infused, deliciously rich, and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I, of course, am your host, Drew Creasman. I am the managing editor of DNVR Rockies. With me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons. And on this episode, we are going to discuss your favorite 90s cartoons. I'm sorry. No, we're going to discuss a seven. I know people are like, no, Rick, can we do the other thing?
I was really excited. You really threw me a curveball there, and I was all set.
And unfortunately, like most of the members of the Colorado Rockies, tonight you swung and missed at that curveball.
Yeah, we may have to come back to this topic, though, by the end. We'll see.
I could go at a great deal of length about 90s cartoons, the golden era. But unfortunately, I suppose we do have to discuss a 7-2 loss for the Colorado Rockies at the hands of the San Francisco Giants. Not a terribly played baseball game in the early going, again for the Rockies, but almost the same story as the day before. Perfectly acceptable start from the starter, an offense that, while they didn't put up a big number, had multiple opportunities throughout the night, a little bit of bad luck not being able to bring in a few more runs than they were able to, and a bullpen that just let the game totally slip away. At this point, Patrick, you can kind of write the script before the game starts.
It was a lot like we've seen in recent memory, maybe even last night. Castellani, as you said, got away with some things, and it seemed like it was a decent start. Did walk 5 guys, but there was the point before Mauricio Dubon hit the home run in the 5th. This was, a 2-2 ball game, and runners are on first and third with 2 outs. You go, Yency, hey, come on in with your almost even 3 ERA, get the job done. And you say, okay, well, we're essentially on an even playing field. And yes, the bullpen would be, then tasked with 4 innings, but it's not setting up entirely for a 7-2 ball game. It's you're right there, but again, as it were, I guess some of Castellani's good luck did not trickle down to Almonte. Dubon goes deep left center, 393 feet, one of the biggest home runs of his career, of his young career, and the Rockies really aren't able to get back and really be too competitive. They did some things late, but not enough to drive any runs across home plate and really, be competitive in these late innings.
Yeah, and like you said there, it does go both ways. And as frustrating as it is to just sort of watch the bullpen and the Rockies throw out another guy to make his MLB debut, and it's no knock on Tommy Doyle, who is thrown into a very difficult spot, but a guy who probably should not be pitching in Major League Baseball this year. And if the Rockies weren't firmly in throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks mode, he wouldn't have been. And all that said, again, a couple of runs against a team that's playing for a playoff spot, you wouldn't, say, oh man, it was terrible. This wasn't like what they did to Antonio Santos.
Yeah.
Earlier in the season, when he had to make his major league debut with the bases loaded and nobody out, and then he had to eat the rest of that game and give up like 8 runs. Like Tommy Doyle, he was like, hey, I gave up a couple, finished my inning, but man, the late innings, like you might as well just watch the first 5 innings of a Rockies game these days if you want to see good baseball.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that, at the beginning of the season, Rockies were in the hunt for this, and sure, a lot of the prognosticators and a lot of the gambling sites will even say, had Colorado, pegged for 26.5 runs, which I thought was low. I didn't think they'd be much better than that. But there is a scenario under a 60-game season that if you play it out over and over again, the Rockies are able to win 35 games. And that, I think that's still true if you look at how talented this roster could be potentially. I think there are other teams right now. If you look at the Miami Marlins, who are sitting right around 500, this is their best case scenario. No two ways about it. So they're living that 10% chance that, hey, a shortened season means we could be in the hunt. And it just so happened the roll of the dice for Colorado was not that good here in the second half. But we're getting to that time where it's a strange world with so many guys on the injured list. David Dahl, of course, before the game, going on the 45-day IL.
Yeah.
Scott Oberg having a thoracic outlet surgery.
Right.
John Gray already we knew was out for the season. Nolan Arenado out, nothing major, just with the AC joint, the shoulder issue that he had there. I think it was in Game 4 in Oakland that just continued to get worse. It's at a stage where it's almost pre-2016. Where you've got these guys coming up in the minors who maybe aren't ready. Maybe you're just trying to get them a look to just see what's going on, but they don't really move the dial. Tommy Doyle was a nice second-round pick back in 2015. I showed some flashes in the bullpen, but again, I hadn't gotten above high A. The organization hasn't really challenged him, and they typically don't, especially with these young relievers. Even Ben Bowden, who's been one of the better ones, hasn't been moved aggressively through the minors.
Right.
So it's just this weird.
Well, then he got hurt in spring training too.
That's right.
Back to your injury list thing.
Yeah.
So it's just been,
It's just a weird season where they go and they're competitive and you go, wow, this team might be able to make a run in the playoffs if all things are well. And then we get to the end of the season and they're just, as you said, with Santos, Mujica, now Doyle, they're just throwing bodies out there to just eat up innings. It's rather strange, for this 2020 season, as all things are strange.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it does, I'm glad you brought that up because I thought of it another way, which was basically, I had written and we had talked about Arenado's struggles throughout the year and how much that's, cost the Rockies. And I feel like that debate gets it oftentimes lost in a lot of personal feelings about the player or about the organization, about everything he's done for them. So let me reframe it this way, because as Patrick noted, the injury occurred on the fourth game of the year. So perhaps reframe it as such. The Colorado Rockies did not have a healthy Nolan Arenado for 90% of the season. And of course that cost them. If I told you before the year, Rockies just aren't going to have him, of course that would impact how many games you think they were capable of winning. It would. Of course it would. And that's now, it's a little extreme to say they didn't have him at all. So of course they still had some tremendous defense out of him this year. As we've talked about before, being dead last in WPA on the team literally means that you have contributed with your offense to winning baseball games less than everybody else in the lineup. And that's a rough spot to be in there. So, but I think that's almost a better way to recognize it is they just didn't have him. Like, forget all the other stuff. Like, don't fight about like we can, or don't, and just compartmentalize, and we can have that argument another time. They basically didn't have their best player for most of this year, and they've got to keep that in mind as they try to build moving forward, whichever way they go.
Right, and I think there's tied in with that is this idea that there just might not be as much depth there as there needs to be, where you've got players to be able to step up and fill the void. And one kind of marker in this is in 2020, with all teams playing on a level playing field, is this idea that your designated hitter, typically, obviously going into the season, all National League teams did not think, we can just get a Matt Kemp, so to speak. We can get a guy that's just a permanent DH, and the Rockies lucked out and they got a lot of production out of him, the first month of the season. But they weren't going out and getting a Nelson Cruz type player. And a lot of teams in the American League don't go out and get a Nelson Cruz type player. They just use that as their ninth best hitter. They use it as an off day, and they just rotate and cycle through. And the Rockies had that advantage where they had an older guy like Kemp going in there who was nice, who was adequate. Daniel Murphy had a couple of days off. Charlie Blackmon, although he doesn't like to be the DH, you can keep those guys fresh, and that's a great strategy on paper. But in this kind of balanced 2020 season, the Rockies have had the worst production out of DH, the worst production out of their essentially ninth best hitter. So again, a lot of that has to do with guys like Dahl, being hurt and players not producing. But it's hard to know where to pinpoint. There's so many things that have gone wrong too. That's the other thing that we'll have plenty of time this offseason. I don't know that there is one thing to point at to say if this were fixed, this team would have had a chance at the 8th seed. And then even still, I don't think, sneaking into the playoffs means everything was fine. Everything went to plan, because the San Francisco Giants, while they've won the last 2 games here against Colorado, they were not a team that was, really expected to do this. So this is just lucky for them.
And quite frankly, they're not as talented a baseball team as the Colorado Rockies.
Oh, no, they are not.
Played better baseball all season long. And to David's question here about, is that a culture thing? I think that's a perfectly fair question to ask. Now, I'm disinclined to go to your next comment and start doing the thing that a lot of people want to do, which is start comparing them to the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Cardinals or these longstanding institutions that have built-in fan bases. And in the case of the Yankees and Dodgers, literally billions of more dollars to spend. So when you say, oh, those guys just bring guys up and every single one of them is great, and it's like, that's largely because they are given the resources to be great. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would stay away from directly comparing it to those teams and stick more with, instead of why can't the Rockies make a superstar out of a guy like Tommy Doyle, which is not necessarily in his pedigree to be something like that. Right? Why can't these guys just have an endless string of prospects they bring up who are awesome, and instead focus on the individual cases where they're clearly not getting what they need to out of the talent they have? That does include guys like Brendan Rodgers, Ryan McMahon, Garrett Hampson. I think at times this season, I feel like there's more there, and there's a coaching and a culture and a leadership attitude that's led to all those things, and it goes all the way up. And by the way, it doesn't stop at the GM. Every once in a while, I'll see people saying, oh man, how can Dick Monfort, still be putting up with this guy, as if Dick Monfort and Jeff Bridich don't generally agree and work together on a lot of these cultural and philosophical issues. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that needs to be, addressed. But I also think most of that stuff takes care of itself if you just build a better roster. And that's just on the table for them to do. And if they want people to stop questioning the dumb stuff that they say sometimes that I don't think is as bad as other people do, but still probably shouldn't be said. Bridich had another one the other day about players just have to play better. Stop saying that. Stop saying that. But he's not wrong, but stop saying it. It's stuff like that. But you go out and you build a better roster. And again, I've thrown some blame at Nolan Arenato for maybe not creating the best clubhouse culture. But you know what creates the great clubhouse culture? And then you don't have to worry about the attitude of your all-time great third baseman. Create a winning roster.
Yeah, it's a lot easier, when Dustin May makes his debut with the Dodgers, or Gavin Lux, and there are a number of Dodgers prospects that come up and they immediately contribute and are fantastic. But when they go up, they're looking around and they're saying, man, these were the guys that were playing in the final series of our profession. They were in the World Series, previously, the 2 straight years before the Nationals in 2019. It's like, man, there's Justin Turner, and believe it or not, they are saying man, that's Kike Hernandez. Yeah, like that's coming out of, their mouths. They're thinking that because of the big plays that these guys have, come up with. So they feel supported, and they say, man, that's the skipper, David Robinson. Man, he pushed all those right buttons. It's an organizational thing too, that they have this belief that, man, everyone's doing everything they can that's right, and that's only going to make everybody better. So, when you insert a guy like that, he has that much confidence in the guys around them that it contributes to positive outcomes. And you don't have to think, man, I got to strike these next two guys out because, the left side of my infield isn't very good, defensively, and I'm going to have problems. The Rockies have that advantage. That's one of those benefits I think that the pitchers have, is they get them to hit a ground ball anywhere. Right. And even if it's, 20 feet off the ground, Nolan and Trevor, they might be able to get up there and get it. Who knows? Right. But again, if you have that confidence in your defense or in your lineup, whatever it is, that just makes your job that much easier. And like you said, Drew, you can't really compare what the Rockies need to do to be successful with the Dodgers and Yankees. And it's not because the Dodgers and Yankees are the best at what they do. Some of it just has to do with, the people that they employ, but a lot of it has to do with the money that is spent and how that typically translates into success. And you have to be smart with that money. And it's not just about signing free agents. It's about the analytics. It's about the coaching. Again, it's about building this culture and doing a lot of things that cost a lot of money. So you have to really compare, apples to apples and look at some of the mid-market to small market teams and say, what are they doing? If really we're going to compare the Rockies with anyone and say, hey, they should do things like this team, it would be the Houston Astros, because they are in a larger market, but I would say it's somewhat similar to Denver. They're not
one big asterisk on that, but obviously you've got to throw that.
Sure, that's fine.
But yes, but philosophically, I mean, just
philosophically,
just remind obviously, I know what you're saying.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Out there, Patrick,
of course not.
Patrick saying what the Rockies need to do is cheat. That's obviously not what you're saying.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, but let's come back to that later. No, but ultimately, a team that's not like, when you think of the all-time great teams, I mean, I don't even know that they're in the top 10 when you're just thinking of you'd say the Chicago White Sox, even though they've, won one World Series in the past 80 years, back in 2005. So again, Houston was just a team that had to do things differently, and they took it to an extreme. And that was, they tanked. They said, let's lose 100 games. If we do it right, we will lose 100 or more games for 3 straight years. So we get not only, the top 3 draft picks, but we get the draft capital that comes with that. And we can go and take any of our players that have any value, trade them for really good prospects, and we can kind of look and see, like, you know what? We just drafted a few, really talented outfielders. Well, you know what? When we trade this guy that has some value, let's get some starting pitching back for him. So really, they're building everything from the ground up, rather than trying to work with all these different moving pieces that a lot of other teams do and do well at. But if you're gonna look at any organization, that might be the one, as far as saying it's the gold standard with an asterisk. Maybe it's the pyrite standard if we're going to put an asterisk next to gold. But you're right. You can't compare Dodgers, even Red Sox, who, outside of the fact that they have one of the worst records in the game right now, they've got a lot of World Series in the past decade or so. Yankees, you can't compare them with those teams.
Yeah, lot of money to spend there. And I pretty thoroughly disagree with your the tanking strategy, but we'll have to get into that another time, I think, because now David is holding our feet to the fire a little bit here with the follow-up. Got to appreciate that. Asking specifically about the direct advantage over small market teams based on that kind of money in a farm system. Like you're saying, I understand you go out buy star players, but how's your farm system? There's a great number of ways, not the least of which is just the resources to trade to replenish your farm system, signing guys like that. Actually, Patrick and I last night were talking about a very specific move that the Dodgers pulled off to do that exact kind of thing that you can do when you can afford to pay somebody a lot of money to not play at all for your organization, which is not something that the Rockies can do when they acquired Homer Bailey. But I sometimes even think it's things simpler than that, like just being able to have the extra cash on hand to employ an army of analytics guys and hitting gurus and pitching coaches for every single one of your prospects, and just all this extra capital that comes through. Manny Randawa mentioned one when he came on the podcast, and we argued with each other for an hour and a half a week or so ago about just the fact that when you get brought up as a Dodger or a Yankee, you're batting 8th, and everyone in front of you is an all-star who's going to hit 30 home runs. And so there's no pressure on you to do anything. If you strike out 3 times or 4 times in your major league debut, no one's going to notice because you probably won the game 8-2 because you're on a juggernaut. And no one cares if it takes the kid 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months or sometimes even 2 or 3 years to figure it out, because everybody else on the team is a superstar. And here, and in most mid-market teams, it's not the case. You freak out over 2 or 3 bad weeks of Brendan Rodgers because you thought he was supposed to be the next big thing. And right now the Rockies need a big thing. And so you need this rookie to save your team. And so there's a number of ways in which having all of those extra resources and built-in advantages allows you to get that much more out of your young players, your prospects. And it's just, it's tough out there. And that's not, when I bring up these things, sometimes people paint it as an excuse. When we talk about the Coors Field factor, talk about these are not excuses. These are starting points. This is what the Colorado Rockies have to be honest about and solve, not run from, not ignore, not pretend, and not use as an excuse. Oh, we can't. They've got more money than we do. They don't have the altitude problem. You've got to figure out how to solve your problem uniquely to you. And that's one of the reasons why I always bring that back up. So it's not about making an excuses, but you have to, I believe, understand these things first in order to truly solve the Rockies' problem. You have to be honest about what it's like that scene in Moneyball when Brad Pitt's Billy Bean sitting around the table going, "What's the problem?" And they keep kind of dancing around it. He goes, No. What is the problem here? And he finally gives them that 50 feet of crap line, right? But what is the Rockies' problem? And far too many people want to, in my view, suggest a solution without recognizing the problem. The way you just did when you suggested, now I disagree with your tank strategy, mostly for like personal philosophical reasons of not liking tanking.
You don't want to lose 300 times in 3 years.
Not that interested.
That's crazy true.
Watching terrible baseball for 3 years, but I understand the argument, and it comes from a place that inherently understands the Rockies' unique situation, and that's where I think there can often be this gigantic disconnect, and I think it can be where there's a disconnect with Jeff Bridich, where he feels like he doesn't need to explain himself because no one's even trying to understand anyway. And it's not a great attitude to have, and it creates a terrible atmosphere. But I don't think he's entirely wrong in that either. And so that's why I'm going to try to judge them based on what they do next. And I have no idea what they're going to do next. I told you that yesterday, Patrick. I said, I legitimately have no idea what happens now. And that's fascinating.
Is it nothing?
In a while.
Do they do nothing? I mean, that could be what happens, and that would be entirely shocking.
That would be awful. That's probably the worst thing they could do.
Yes, probably.
And it might be the safest bet, but I don't know, man. I got a gut feeling it's not. Well, first of all, they almost can't do nothing, right? There are holes on the roster. At the very least, they have to sign bodies, right? Like they got to bring in a couple of dudes, unless Tommy Doyle's going to be your number 6 guy in the bullpen next year. Like, I don't,
I think going back to David's question about like what's the advantage between the mid and the small markets, the small markets don't have any window of error. Like the Rockies, say what you will, they made the playoffs in 2018, and they Wade Davis had a really solid season, but they still overpaid for Davis and Shaw and McGee, and then they got nothing from them the next 2 years, and it didn't entirely cripple them. I think in a way, they gave money to Ian Desmond, Mike Dunn. Like there are those players, and it didn't totally destroy them. So they kind of had a little bit of wiggle room because they had these young guys coming up through the pipeline, and that was fine. If you're a small market team, you can't do that. You have to work smarter, not harder. And I think sometimes being in the middle is the worst scenario because you look and go, oh man, if we only had the money like the Yankees, we could do this. And well, those small market teams, they got to go extreme. They got to have something as crazy as an opener, and that's just bonkers. And you really have almost no identity. And I bring that up because that was an element from this game today, which I think was a really interesting piece, was that the Giants went out, used an opener with Caleb Behringer, and, went an inning because Logan Webb ultimately is just a guy who throws a lot of pitches and, his longest start, I think, going into this game, he made his debut this season, was about 5 innings. So this was kind of a longer outing, but it was just a really creative way. Instead of saying, all right, Logan, you're immediately going to go out and face Tapia, Pilar, Story. And if you don't do that perfectly, Charlie Blackmon right after that. Like that's hard for a young guy. So instead they throw out a guy with a 4.5 ERA, got the job done. And then Webb continued. And next thing you know they're in the 7th inning, and now they only need about 8 more outs, and they've won the ball game. And this is just a little thing that I would have really loved for the Rockies to have jumped in on at some point this season. Not because it has it's indicative of the starting pitching, because it's been very, very good, but it bridges the gap to the bullpen or the end of the game, the 8th and 9th inning, that much better. Kyle Freeland going out there and facing, the cleanup hitter to lead off rather than the leadoff hitter to lead off now could end up meaning, you know what? Shut it down. I've got the final 8 innings. Like we could have seen that a few times this season.
Absolutely.
We could have seen that a few times, but again, why does that not happen? Again, that's something that Jeff Bridich and the analytics team would have to answer.
I think I've got the answer for you. And I can't. I certainly can't promise that they would do it if this were not the case. But certainly, if I was in those meetings, the big wrench in that is you got to have a reliever with your mid-4 ERA. You got to have a reliever who you feel semi-solid about, who you can put out there at the very beginning of the game, who's not going to put you behind the 8 ball and lose the thing right away. And right now, the Rockies have exactly 2 relievers they feel confident in. One of them lost the game for them tonight with a big 3-run jack at the worst possible time.
That's baseball. That's baseball.
Right. And now that you're out of it, try it anyway. But I mean, I think that's part of the problem too is, and I think this, oh, damn, I wish I could. There was another strategic thing that I saw happen tonight that I was thinking the same thing. Like, I hope that doesn't convince them not to keep doing it. Right. It's like if you start shifting a lot because the numbers tell you to shift a lot and they're right. And then you give up the game-winning hit in, let's say, game 5 after really going to heavily shifting, and it goes right through where the shift should have been. You go, and you freak out and you stop, right? The Rockies did a version of the opener in 20. Help me out, chat.
They did something where they had like a rotating guys where there were like 2 guys that would be starting and they'd piggyback on each other, and they give that a little while. Maybe they didn't have the right set of guys, but go ahead, tell me about that.
They very much didn't. That was exactly right. There was just like they tried it as like an emergency solution to just not having enough talent, and then when the talent that they didn't have continued to not be that talented and give up runs, they were like, I guess this doesn't work, and kind of scrapped the idea. And I think it's really too bad because conceptually, I think it was a really good idea for the Rockies to do something like that. And I still think it would be a good idea to have. I think you've got to have a couple of guys who are normal starters, right? 3 guys who still go out there and just do the normal start thing, but creating that sort of piggyback situation at the back end of your rotation, having guys who are ready to go in if somebody doesn't have it on any given day, those long relievers, because whether you're doing it by design or not, it's happening. And for 27 years, games get crazy for the Colorado Rockies more than any other team, and especially at Coors Field. So yeah, I think it would be a great idea, but I think, there's a risk to trying it when you don't have the personnel to pull it off and then convincing yourself that it doesn't work.
That's precisely right. Is that, I would love to have known where that idea came from. Was it just more of a concept, or was there actual analytics involved? Was there something in the numbers and the data that suggested, oh, no, this actually will work with this group? Because I would tend to think
proprietary analytics from Dan O'Dowd.
Yeah. So yeah, that's super interesting right there to see how that would play out over much longer period of time, because maybe that does work. And yeah, there's a lot more to talk about this and flesh it out over the season, because you just have to be smarter, not harder, and do some strange things. I mean, it's one of the reasons why MLB going into the season created certain rules about having position players pitch, because ultimately teams were realizing, you know what, let's just punt these games. Let's just punt these late innings. We'll have a position player go out, because having those extra 2 innings from one of our relievers, or an inning apiece from those relievers, that is going to be the difference in a game that we can win.
Yeah.
If statistically we have a 7% chance of winning this game in the 8th inning, and it's probably much lower than that, because we're talking about a 7-run lead in the 8th inning. So it's like, okay, we have a 2% chance of winning this game. Ian Desmond, Mark Reynolds, Drew Butera, go ahead and pitch. It doesn't mean anything. But tomorrow, when we've got a 2-2 ball game with runners on the corners in the 6th inning, now what happens in this at bat is worth 10% wave of differential there. So we got to have that right guy, and if we use the wrong guy the night before when we had little to no chance of winning, well, we lost this game based on something we had done the previous day, because we didn't look at the numbers correctly.
None. Yeah, it just helped us none. Yeah, absolutely.
So sometimes you have to make those tough decisions and do that, whether it's an opener, a position player, punt, do something different, whatever it is, and win the games that you can win. Make sure you win those games, and the ones you can't, try something different.
All right, we can't sign off before talking about, of course, our draft king of the game. It had to go to somebody, and you got to use that promo code DNVR, by the way, over at the DraftKings Sportsbook app. But it does go, I think, maybe actually for only like the 2nd or 3rd time this year, to our boy, Raimel Tapia. Another couple of base hits out there, got involved on both of the Colorado Rockies scoring plays. Again, you're sort of grasping at straws when you're coming up with kings of the game in an ugly loss like this. But Tapia continues to be a bright spot. No, he didn't hit the crap out of either of them, though. Actually, that's not true. The double he hit, at first I thought, because people were kind of making a big deal out of a slight misplay from Alex Dickerson in left field, and suggesting that that ball should have been caught, but it was 99 miles an hour off the bat and had an expected batting average of like 480, I think it was. So, hard RBI double for Tap. He's going the other way. He's using his speed as a tool. He's being the pest. He's being El Cangrejo. He's doing everything that he was supposed to do. This is Raimel Tapia as advertised, finally here for your daily viewing pleasure.
And if it were not for Charlie Blackmon's 2 doubles, who he was in the running for it, if anyone is interested in what goes on behind the scenes for our voting.
Up in the 7-2 loss,
yes,
the draft king of the game.
Exactly. Yeah, if you want to know the voting process, he was runner up, but yeah, he didn't factor in either runs, whereas Tapia did. Scored the 1st, drove in the 2nd. But those 2 doubles were pretty key for Charlie Blackmon, because it kept him above 300, batting 305. And our DraftKings king of the game, Raimel Tapia, his 2 hits put him at 299. So Mr. 400 in the quest for the asterisk shortened season, Charlie Blackmon, has now come back down to earth, and Raimel Tapia is now floating in outer space, if we're going to stick with the analogy. But he's only 6 percentage points away from Charlie Blackmon there. So again, Josh Fuentes, doesn't have quite as many at bats, but right now it's looking like Raimel Tapia might actually be second on the team in batting average, which is a little bit wild. It's both good news and bad news, but we'll focus on the good news today.
Yeah. Certainly something that could have been predicted. That was. That was predicted by me. All right, enough of that. Kenneth, you've sucked me back into it. We'll do it a little bit before we get out of here. Best 90s cartoons. 1 is Batman, 2 is X-Men, and then things get messy. Then we get into giant screaming match fights. I can't debate too hard over those top 2. Ninja Turtles, Darkwing Duck, Spider-Man.
I loved Darkwing Duck when I forgot about
Duck
that.
Is so good. I am the terror that flaps in the night.
I don't have nearly as many conversations about 90s cartoons as I probably should, but Darkwing Duck was there. DuckTales. I mean, DuckTales was great.
Yes.
I think it was a Nintendo game. It may have been Sega, but the DuckTales video game was very good.
Yes.
It might have been Sega. That was a very underrated game. I did remember watching briefly that sports cartoon where it was like Wayne Gretzky, Bo Jackson, and Michael Jordan, where the 3 of them had like a little cartoon and they went and fought crime or something like that. Probably only lasted 1 season, but
awesome.
It was great for me as a kid.
Awesome.
Ninja Turtles.
Gargoyles. Ninja Turtles was awesome. Gargoyles was great.
Animaniacs is probably probably the best of the 90s. If we're really...
It's still not better than Batman, but it's the cleverest. It's probably the cleverest, animated show that's still actually for children, but definitely
we can all agree, more people love that than more people could enjoy that. If you're doing awards, you know what? You'd be like, this is a little too dark, or this is too much for kids. There was a little something for everybody. I feel in Animaniacs that made that. Fantastic of a show. I never saw Gargoyles. I don't think I even know that.
Oh, really? Oh, Gargoyles was fun. Gargoyles was good. Tiny Toons, Kenneth, that's a great poll. Tiny Toons was amazing. It never
Muppet Babies?
For me. Yes.
Muppet Babies was pretty early. And then what about Nickelodeon? I don't think we touched on any Nickelodeon.
I wasn't a big, see, those ones I can't weigh in on as much because I didn't have cable TV back in the day. So I only got all these network shows. So I didn't watch much Rugrats or Doug or shows like those. Although is that in the 90s? I feel like we're getting a little bit later in time.
Maybe
Nickelodeon ones. Yeah.
Real Monsters, I think is what it was called. I didn't like that one, but
Fairly Odd Parents, Ren and Stimpy.
Oh,
there you go. That's a different category. There we go. MTV animated. Daria.
Yes.
And Hey Arnold. Man.
The Wild Thornberries. I think that was another Nickelodeon one. Never got into it, but I was very much aware.
Those are the ones I was aware of. But
Ren and Stimpy. And then Beavis and Butthead, if you're talking MTV.
Beavis and Butthead.
The Head. I think that was a weird one. One of those late ones that are on MTV that you're like, what am I watching? Wait, wasn't Spawn also on MTV late?
Yeah.
I didn't get into that. It scared me.
Well, it would still. It's frightening. It's legitimately it's good though. I think you have to put Beavis and Butthead on a top 10 list as just honorably, even if it's
iconic.
Not it has to be at number 10. Put it at number 10. Don't mess around. Put Beavis.
It's like Animaniacs. It's not one of my all-time
number
favorite.
5 at the lowest.
But you just go respect. You gotta respect it.
Yeah,
I still had it on, on occasion.
Oh yeah,
man, Darkwing Duck. That's a good pull, man. I haven't thought about that one in forever. Loved it.
Let's get dangerous. See it
Launchpad McQuack. Love that name.
Yes.
Oh, Chippendale Rescue Rangers. Because
yes. Chippendale Rescue.
and with Monterey Jack. I don't remember the other characters other than Chip and Dale. Ah, yes.
And the girl mouse, Gadget or something like that. Is that right?
Was it? I can't think of it. Just a cheese.
Tailspin was the spin-off of
Jungle Book. Wasn't it Jungle Book? Like it wasn't about like bears and stuff.
Yeah, flying planes.
Gadget, you did. You're
Gadget.
there. Speaking of Gadget, you have Inspector
Gadget.
Gadget, Inspector.
Pink Panther.
Pink Panther, never got into that one.
I watched the Pink Panther cartoon.
No.
No, I think that may be earlier. I think technically that might be.
That could have maybe been 80s.
Yeah.
Might have been. But yeah, man, 90s was you're right, that might have been like the golden era. Like 80s was when cartoons was like, hey, no, it's okay. It's cool. You know, you could kind of maybe even do a little bit for the adults, but 90 was when it was like totally embraced.
Right. Like Transformers and like Thundercats.
Transformers might have been, I wonder if it might have touched in like 89, I'm wondering.
So Transformers might have maybe even gotten into 90. I'd have to go back, yeah.
Well, I mean, like it could have started around, let's say, 89.
Okay. Yeah.
He-Man was
right.
mid to late 80s.
He-Man and She-Ra. And the new She-Ra, by the way, on Netflix is dope. It's actually legitimately very good.
I didn't even know this was around. I thought I'd caught wind that they were going to do it.
Yeah.
Is it it's more of a series than a movie?
Yeah. 20-minute episodes. They're short, they're fun, they're simple and lighthearted and good messages and fun for anybody to enjoy. That kind of thing where you're like
Oh, I'm thinking of She-Hulk. That's why I'm like She-Ra. I'm like, all I can see is
forgot about Dennis the Menace. But no. She-Ra was like is in the He-Man. She's got a big sword too. They're doing by the power of Grayskull and all that.
Did you know, and I just learned this recently from a very good radio show that I listened to that is co-hosted by Sam Roberts, who's a WWE guy and does NXT, where there were a lot of apparently cartoon shows in the 80s that were only cartoon shows to sell toys. Like they're like, all right, let's come up with these really cool toys and these muscular guys. Okay, well, it's He-Man. You're like, well, we got to sell the toys. We'll have a TV show.
Yeah.
Boom. Same thing with Ninja Turtles. And they got the TV show.
Ninja Turtles, yeah.
And it makes sense because I know like when I would go to the supermarket, you'd see these toys and be like, okay, these look cool, but I've never seen a show with these guys. I'm not gonna buy those guys. You know, because there was no emotion attached to it. They don't have a TV show. They look cool, but I don't know the background story. So you never got those. So it makes sense you would need to have the TV show in order to sell that merch.
Yeah, that actually completely changed the nature of the Ninja Turtles. I don't know if you know that whole story, but originally they were much gruffer characters aimed at a teenage audience. It was a much darker thing, and it was a parody of Marvel stuff, and particularly of Daredevil. And like in Daredevil, one of the groups that he's always fighting against is called the Hand. That's why in the Ninja Turtles are always fighting against the Foot
Clan. Oh, the Foot, yeah.
There are a ton of parodies of Marvel stuff in there, but it was supposed to be kind of a like ribbing them, and they were like not doing that great or whatever. And then once they made the toys, and they were like, actually, we should sell this to kids. The everything you just described, they were like, oh, we're completely the guys who made them, by the way, did this. Eastman and Laird, the names of the guys. Yes, I know way more about the Ninja Turtles.
And video games were great too.
They're fantastic. Turtles.
That would. That would be one that if I had enough expendable money to buy some like old school arcade games, the Ninja Turtle one I think would definitely be one of them. Simpsons was a good one. Wow, we got to save it for the off season. The arcade games. Incidentally, in the comic book, did the Ninja Turtles also like pizza, or was it something else? And they're like, we got to sell pizza to the kids. And
yeah, right. I'm pretty sure. But and yes, Kenneth, I've got all 3 of the original trilogy movies on DVD, and I've got that animated Ninja Turtles flick that they did. on Blu-ray. I don't own either of the Michael Bay ones, though I did see them and thought they were fine.
Oh, the Ninja Turtle starring Corey Feldman. Is that the one you have? The first one?
Yeah. Oh, that. Oh,
the
yeah.
Feld Dog.
And the best one is probably Secret of the Ooze.
That was the second one?
Yeah. Well, no, the best one's the first one. But
also
but it doesn't have Vanilla Ice in it, so.
But you know who it does? I think I got this right. You know who it does have in the second one? Oh my God! If you don't know this one, this is just going to be.
No, you're right. Yeah, no.
Oh,
I know
you do know?
Yeah, Shredder.
Big sexy
Kevin Nash.
Kevin Nash was Shredder.
I found
that would have been great.
Year or so I just barely beat you to it. But yeah,
that would have been cool if I got you on that. Nice.
And all the Casey Jones sports puns. One of the greatest lines in the history of American cinema is when he swings his bat at Raphael, who catches it and says, "Jose Canseco bat? Tell me, you didn't pay money for this."
Very
Come
nice.
on.
Casey Jones is great.
You can't kick my ass with a Jose Canseco bat, man. Go get it. I love
that
it.
hockey stick hanging out in the back, man. That's just
classic stuff. Classic stuff. All right, we should probably sign off. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out for mostly baseball talk and then a little bit of fun cartoon stuff. Because
Rockies lost 7-2, by the way.
Was that what it was?
We'll put a pin on it. Let's close it out.
Well, they're going to play another one tomorrow, and we'll watch that and mostly talk about it as well. So hang out with us. Make sure you're following us on the social media at Patrick D. Lyons, at Drew Creasman, at DNVR_Rockies. Give us a subscribe over at the DNVR.com so that you don't miss out on any of that written content. Plus, you get discounts on shirts, hats, masks. You get bigger beers when you come on down to the DNVR bar. All kinds of great stuff for being a member here at the DNVR.com. Other than that, we can only ask that you continue to be absolutely awesome out there. We will continue to be absolutely Patrick Lyons and Drew Creasman in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.